I'm Jeanne Meserve, and we are marking an important anniversary. 20 years ago, three men embarked on a journey to the International Space Station, where they became the first full-time inhabitants. We are now marking 2 decades of habitation, cooperation, and investigation. Today, we're going to be talking about what's been done up there, what it has meant, and we're going to do that by talking to the crew of Expedition 1 and some of those who supported them. This conversation is brought to you by the team at NASA and by the Space Foundation with the support of Boeing. We had hoped to do this conversation in person at the Space Symposium, but COVID. So let me introduce to you our guests today, joining us virtually. First, the members of the crew. We have the commander who is with us, Bill Shepard. He joins us from Virginia. Also with us from Russia, his crewmates, Sergei Krikalev and also Yuri Gidzenko. Also joining us from Texas, a man whose vision and management and oversight was crucial to the success of the mission, George Abbey. He is the former director of the Johnson Space Center, and also joining us is Ginger Kerrick of NASA, who was the Russian Training Integration Instructor for Expedition 1. Great to have you all with us here today. George Abbey, I'd love to start with you and get a sense of what you hoped for from this mission. What was your goal? What did NASA think it would get out of this?
Well, I thought it was very important that we partner with our Russian colleagues. We were working on a space station and had been working on it for some period of time, and we're not too successful, so we went through a redesign. And I felt it was important to bring our Russian colleagues in and make them a part of the program. And actually, the program started with the shuttle Mir, which was the Russian space station. And that gave us an opportunity to get some experience on space stations, as we were not flying a space station. And we were able to work with the Russians and do that on the Mir program, at the same time partnering with them on an international space station. And it was turned out to be an excellent partnership, and I think our success was really in a large part due to the fact that we had that partnership. And so as we worked and flew the Shuttle Mir program, we were looking ahead to the International Space Station and finally being able to get that first element up, and then of course get the crew up, which came about 1.5 years after that first element went up. So I was looking forward to that day, and with great expectations and great hope that we would finally get the program underway and get that first crew up there, which we did. And we were fortunate to have all 3 crew members with us this morning.
And I wanted to ask you about these 3 crew members. Why were these 3 picked for Expedition 1?
Well, I think they were picked based on their experience and their backgrounds. We wanted to make sure that first crew was an experienced crew, and it was going to be a first time in space with the space station. And we wanted someone who had been up there before and also could work in that environment, and if there were problems, could deal with them. And we selected a crew where we had high confidence with the 3 crewmen that they would be able to do that. And that turned out to be certainly the case. And we were fortunate to have all 3 of them up there as we went through that first step on Expedition 1.
Ginger, you ended up working with these guys for years, getting them ready for this mission. Would you agree this was the right combination of personalities and skills?
Oh, absolutely. From day one, you got to remember, this is the first time we were training a crew for the space station. So we were building it as we went along. And all 3 of the crew members were quick to identify gaps in the support plan that we had put forward, not only for training, but for operations. So they were the perfect people. It took the courage for them to step out and try to establish a new training paradigm, a new operations paradigm, and they proved to be successful once they executed their mission.
Sergei, I'd like to ask you and Shep both. You were both come out of a military background where you were trained to view one another as adversaries. here you're put in a situation where you're going to interact cooperatively. Was that a difficult transition, or did that come naturally to both of you?
Sure. Sergei, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. At first, I came not from military background, so that's one point. And second, maybe most important, that this was not the first experience. My first space flight was international mission together with French cosmonaut, but also before that, before this mission, I was trained and flew twice on shuttle. First flight was on STS-60, and we were trained together. Charlie Bolden was the commander of this mission. And my second flight on shuttle was actually first assembly mission. So first station assembly mission, STS-88 with Bob Cabana as a commander. So it was not the first experience. And actually, even before us, many years ago, was very good example of good relations and good partnership start from Soyuz Apollo. So we were based on previous experience, and we were ready for good cooperation, and that's why I think everything went very smooth from my point of view.
Now, Shep, you did have a military background. I'm right there, aren't I?
Yeah, actually, Yuri and I were really the two military guys. Jumping way ahead in the answer, one of my most interesting moments with Yuri in space was looking at the Earth, and he was saying, okay, I was a MiG-21 pilot and I was stationed here, and half an orbit later I would say, okay, I was a Navy SEAL and we were here and here and here. And that was a really interesting dialogue. But I think my personal interest in being part of this crew was to try and put the space station on the footing of either the early space voyages where we did not have a lot of contact with the ground, and that seemed to me to be much more like being on a ship or a submarine than flying an airplane. So NASA had a shuttle program which was basically airplane flying, and I thought we were doing something different with space station. That's why I really wanted to be in the first crew. I went to Russia. I had certain views on how the partners should interact, and fortunately Yuri and Sergei helped me maybe change my views quite a bit on what I thought was the right way to do things. And so I was really fortunate to have both those guys on the crew because they taught me a lot.
Yuri, from your perspective, what was the biggest challenge here? Was it one of language? Was it one of culture? Was it the technological integration?
С вашей точки зрения, Юрий, что было наиболее сложным?
Я единственное, по-русски отвечу. У нас было достаточно много в плане подготовки этому полету у нас. Оля, будешь переводить или как?
Yes, we had some difficulties as we just started training for the mission.
И это даже были трудности не вот между нашим вот какими-то отношениями деловыми, дружескими, а именно то, что во время нашей подготовки одновременно создавалось таких
We are breaking up a little bit here. Юрий, скажите, пожалуйста, еще раз, потому что последней вашей фразы не было слышно.
Ну, у нас не было во время нашей подготовки нормальных учебных условий. У нас тренажеров.
Yes, we did some difficulties, but not in interaction as friends or as crew members here, future crew members. We had some difficulties in preparation because we were just starting and we didn't have all the proper materials or the simulators were not up to par. We were just starting out, and that was a difficulty in training, not in interaction.
Но с другой стороны, это было интересно. С другой стороны, это было интересно, потому что нам приходилось участвовать в различного рода.
Gene, if I might suggest, why don't you ask Ginger if she can explain what brain sharing was?
Brain sharing.
Yeah.
Okay.
We might pull up
And
pictures.
my apologies, you're just breaking up a little bit. I think Olga's having a little bit of trouble making out what you're saying. Ginger, you want to hop in here?
Oh, sure. So one of the things that Yuri was talking about was it was difficult to train when you didn't have training materials, you didn't have all the right simulations. So we spent a lot of time with the hardware owners, the hardware developers. And there was one particular instance where this brain sharing name came to be is Shep had gone and met with one of the hardware developers and was asking a series of questions, 3 or 4 questions. And then Sergei was a little late. So Sergei comes in and he looks at the hardware and immediately same 3 or 4 questions. And we're just like, oh my God, they're sharing a brain now, these two.
I'm curious about the language issue. What was the language that you spoke of? And Sergei, you want to weigh in?
I wanted to add maybe what Shep said, that shuttle was closer to airplane in a way of operating because it was most of the time in COM. But actually with us, Yuri and I had previous experience of flying on Mir, and communication system and way how we operate on the station was very similar what we expected to be on ISS, especially for first expedition, when we have very limited comm, we had to make decision ourselves in case of malfunction, and we have to be more or less self-sufficient. So as I said, it was very interesting also because a lot of new things have to happen on this first mission, and that's why we are exactly what Shep said. It's more like submarine or ship at sea.
Language. In talking to all of you, can see that that Shep and Ginger both speak some Russian. Yuri and Sergei, you speak English. What was the language on the International Space Station? What did you speak? And I would presume that in that kind of a situation, you really have to be thinking in the right language, that you can't be going through the translation process.
Yeah, I think we went back and forth quite a bit. Yuri, go ahead.
Maybe for me at the beginning, I had some challenges with English language. Just only for me. I think Sergei don't have any challenges with this one, but have our English classes with teachers in Russia, in Houston, had explanation about some systems. And after several months, I mean, in a year, that was not very important for me speak in English or just listen to classes. That was nice. And I think the same was for Shep.
Yeah, I thought initially that because the United States had an agreement with the other partners where we said English was going to be the standard language, that would be the way to go. But I got to Russia and was working with many of the engineers, technicians, and managers. Some of these people helped to put Sputnik in space and launched Yuri Gagarin, and these people were still there. And so I said, well, we're not going to completely invert the Russian space system because we like English. But even beyond that, it's not enough to know what the Russians did. The key element of making a space station work was to understand why the Russians approached problems a certain way. And the only method by which we were really going to get to that was if we could talk to all these people in Russian. So that became the way we operated. If we could pull up picture number 4, I'll show you kind of one of the crutches that we used to get by that, if we can do some screen sharing here. Yeah, and what this is going to be a picture of me in one of the training mock-ups, and a big sheet of paper to the right is a a big schematic drawing of the air purification system that I'm working on. And our effort, early on in the space station training, was to create very understandable graphic diagrams of all the systems that we had to use. And Ginger, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we still use these today.
Yes, we still use those today.
And for me, that was a big help, because a lot of times I could go through class and I could look at the diagram, and even if I didn't get 100% what the instructor was trying to teach us, I could make sense out of it by referring to the diagram.
So, Ginger or Shep, I'm curious as to whether the Russians had a very different approach to training. If there were things that you learned from participating in Russia that might not have been obvious to you previously.
Yeah, they broke down lessons into theoretical and practical, and you would get all of your theoretical lessons and then do your practical lessons. They had less of a reliance on diagrams and documentation because the people teaching the classes were experts and knew that information inside and out. Whereas on the US side, we were all starting up. A lot of the instructors were young. I was young at that time. And so we were developing materials and we didn't have the expertise. So it was interesting to see the dichotomy between the US approach and the Russian approach. But we learned a lot from each other. And I think each of us adapted our approaches so that we were both better off in the end.
Sergei, to hear your perspective from the Russian side, did the Americans have something to teach you?
Actually, Ginger is 100% correct. We were learning from each other. And returning back to your previous question, what was the language? Shep was speaking some Russian, we were speaking some English, so we called this mixture of languages Runglish. And that's what we use during the mission. We actually had this name when I was training for shuttle flight. And actually for us, it was very interesting exchange of experience because we were, Ginger is right, we were based more on theoretical knowledge of the system, and preparation for long duration flight was such that we were not able to repeat every step for several times getting ready for the flight, because flight itself is long and you cannot do kind of usual rehearsal. But in shuttle it's possible to do, and training for short duration flight is little different. But what we learned that we can use more computer generated lessons or mock-up simulators. Before that, computer was not as available, and we had to have all this diagram in our head. We had to understand how system worked, and it actually had some advantages, because if you are working in stressful environment in a limited amount of time, sometimes it's better to have everything in your head, although it's more difficult to build up this knowledge. But as we said, we were learning from each other. We tried to share our experience of Mir missions, and we were learning from all this computer supported training from US side. And I think at the end, now we have some kind of mixed system of training crew for now. Actually, it may be one more difficulties we had in the beginning. No one exactly knew what kind of knowledge we will need in flight. So for this purpose, in case of this uncertainty, we had to have more information that we really needed, because no one knew how much information exactly we need. And I see now that training for subsequent missions, and especially now, allow people to learn only what they really need for the flight. In our case, we learn with some margin, and it was really interesting.
Yuri, did you want to weigh in on what you might have learned from the American side?
I agree with Sergei. И хочу еще раз повторить, что нам повезло. Мы не только учились, участвовали в обсуждении каких-то вопросов, связанных с станцией, с системами станций, как с американской, так и с российской стороны.
Слушай, Юра, у тебя там динамиков нет рядом, потому что такое впечатление, тебя запирает сигнал. Посмотри, если динамики рядом есть, куда-нибудь в сторону их отверни от микрофона.
Well, it was actually interesting to work together because we were learning from each other, and different approaches helped us to understand the station's best.
George, was this exactly the kind of synergy you wanted to see come out of this international mission?
Yes, it was. It really turned out just to be what I had hoped it to be. And we had worked with our Russian colleagues before on Apollo Soyuz, the first joint docking mission. And so I had confidence that we would be able to work with them, and it would really turn out to be a good partnership for us, and that we could learn from them, and hopefully they could learn from us. And between our two nations, we would come up with a great space station. And I think this crew made it all happen.
Hey, Jeanne, one important point that Sergei touched on that I want to double down on. In Houston, we had extensive simulators for the shuttle, and the crew spent hundreds of hours in these machines. And quite often we would be sitting waiting for the computers come up because the sim had crashed. And it happened like twice a day. And it took about 30 or 40 minutes to reboot the computers and get everything running again. When I got to Star City and I asked the instructors there about their Soyuz simulator and how often they had to reboot it because it had crashed, the answer was, well, we do this maybe once a year. And so when I finished the space station and I came back to Johnson, I was trying to get the point across to senior management that the way the Russians design some things is really good, and we need to learn from this. Unfortunately, space technology being what it is, we have a fascination, particularly in the States, with the most complex things we can build. I'm not sure that's the right answer.
George Abbey, I have to give you a chance to respond to that.
Oh, I think I would go along with what Shep says. I think the Russian design approach is a very good one, and they come up with very reliable equipment and very reliable systems. And I think we learn from them, and hopefully we can adapt some of those lessons and incorporate them into our spacecraft. But yes, I agree with Shep.
Ginger, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your feelings after working with these guys for years. They're about to take off. Tell me that story of what that was like and what you felt seeing them launch.
Yeah, I spent 4 years of my life wherever this crew was, that's where I was. If we were in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, looking at the service module before it launched, I was right there with them. If we were in Florida, if we were in Huntsville, Alabama, or Houston, or Star City, Russia. So we formed quite the bond. And so on launch day, I got to go to their launch, and it was a foggy day. And I remember watching them walk up the stairs of the launch vehicle. And as soon as that hatch shut, I started hyperventilating. And I know the spacecraft, I knew that they were going to be safe, but something inside me said, my family is going on a rocket, and I could not handle it. And one of the Russian high-ranking military officials noticed that, put his arm around me, and started parting the crowd to try to bring me to a closer view. And as he's doing that, he says, "Et the mama equipaja, et the mama equipaja, it's the mother of the crew, get out of the way." And but he put me in a spot where I could watch them, and I was reassured that everything was going to be okay. But it was weird because we were a family of 4, and 3 of them were going to space.
And so the 3 of you arrive at the space station. Love to get your first impressions. Sergei, what did you feel? What did you see? What did you smell as you arrived there?
Actually, the service module of International Space Station is very similar to a core module of Mir Station mechanically. So the only difference I felt that we came to the station and it was very new, very clean, and not completely empty, but much emptier that this space happened to be after several months of crew living there. So I remember we were discussing with designers on the ground that maybe the table we had in the middle of this big compartment can be not assembled as a full part, maybe only part of it can exist. But when we came, there was no table. We switch on lights, and the first thing we need to do is prepare our TV downlink to have a teleconference from the station. And we start to search for connectors. And it was typical operation, but it was very memorable. Switching on light for the first time when we came to almost dark station, switching on light, and it became very light.
Hot water.
And trying to make hot water, because for 2 days we were flying on Soyuz. We had only snacks and cold food. So we knew how the system is built and start to activate hot water to have hot drink on the station. Right, Yuri is right.
Yuri, the job of your crew primarily was to set up house on the space station. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, what you had to do when you got there, besides getting hot water for something to drink?
Вначале я хотел бы сказать, что когда мы пристыковались, мы не сразу открыли люк на станции с Сергеем. Когда проверили герметичность, начали открывать люк, а он не открывается. Его присосало. Мы минут, наверное, 5, там упирались ногами. Думаем, как же так, прилетели, а на станцию попасть не можем.
Well, first I want to say that when we just got there, we were not able to open the hatch right away. We had struggled with Sergei, with our legs, with our arms for maybe 5 minutes. And we were thinking, how come? We just arrived to the station, but we are not able to get in.
А когда мы попали уже на станцию, вот как Сергей сказал, включили свет, подогрели воду, туалет расконсервировали. И я помню, как шеф сказал, ну все, свет есть, вода есть, туалет есть, жить можно.
And when we finally opened the hatch and we got in, as Sergei said, we turned on the light, we got some hot water, we activated the toilet. And I remember chef said, now we can live. We have light, we have hot water, and we have a toilet.
Hey, Jeanne, jumping in again, I think history may forget our first cargo ship came up about 10 days after we arrived. And Yuri did a great job of docking it because it was supposed to find us automatically. But it came up and it was acting very strangely. And Yuri flew it in by hand. Maybe he can tell a little bit, Yuri and Sergei can tell a little bit about how that went. It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Yeah, it was unusual docking because, as Shep said, this cargo vehicle is supposed to approach and then dock in automatic mode. But when it came for about 100 meters range, then it started to wobble and searching for docking. And this oscillation became so big that it started to be dangerous. And fortunately, we had opportunity to manual control it. So we had to switch to manual control, and Yuri was controlling it by hand controllers installed in the station. But next issue was that lens on the camera that was used for aligning the vehicle was fogged, and we didn't know what is this fog. Is it kind of glue? And something else stick to the window of this camera or something else. So we call this remote control of the vehicle mode is teleoperation mode. But the problem was that because Yuri cannot see station and target well, I was jumping to window, and we have what we said teleoperation mode, because I was looking out in the window, give some guidance to Yuri, and Yuri was trying to control it, try to use some image on the monitor and some information that he got from because I was looking directly to approaching vehicle. So finally, we were able to keep this vehicle very close to the station, and on sunlight, this fog on the lens came out, and we were able finally to dock. But it was very unusual way of docking vehicle. But fortunately, we had very many layers of redundancy, and one of these layers worked out well, and we were able to do docking safely. And maybe Shep can add something, because he was monitoring and recording this, looking at us jumping to the control panel, to window and back.
Yeah, I think it's one of the issues of, if you will, the culture. Russian designs put in many ways to get things done. There's lots of redundancy, and in some programs, the U.S. does not have as much. And I think that's one of the things in the future we need to pay a lot of attention to.
Shep, can you tell us what the average day would have been like? This was obviously an unusual day when you had this docking drama, but what about the average day? What did you guys do? Did you have assigned responsibilities? Did you all do a little bit of everything? How did it go?
Well, I got to say that I don't think you could say we had an average day, at least not too many of them. But this was good because we were up there to get a lot of work done, and every day seemed to have its own set of challenges. We got up 6:30ish in the morning. I like to get a cup of coffee and read on the laptop or the printouts, kind of what the ground wanted us to do. But from then on, it was kind of free for all. The one thing I did enjoy was we got together around the galley table. Another story about that, but 3 times a day we made a point to have our meals together, and that was a big part of keeping everybody kind of on the same plan of the day. But I'll let Yuri and Sergei talk about their perspectives.
Yuri, tell us what you thought.
Yep.
Ooh, really having trouble hearing you.
Сигнал заткнулся.
А вот сейчас слышно?
Сейчас слышно.
Отлично. Я вот хочу сказать, вот у меня вот собственное ощущение после 20 лет, что вот мы первые несколько недель только и делали, что постоянно работали.
Well, my impression after looking back, 20 years back, seems like the first couple of weeks we were just working and working and working.
Особенно первую неделю. Мы, по-моему, побрились на станции дня через 3, 4 или 5 даже, по-моему, первый раз.
Больше, Юр. Мы не сразу еще и бритвы нашли.
Especially the first week. I think the first shaving we shaved probably like 3 days after we arrived, or maybe even later, because we were not able to find the equipment. Right.
Но все равно это было очень интересно.
But it was extremely interesting, very interesting.
George, I'm curious if there ever was tension between what the United States wanted the crew to be doing and what the Russians wanted the crew to be doing.
No, actually, there wasn't any of that kind of tension. I think having worked with the Russians on the Mir program, the shuttle Mir program, we had developed a lot of confidence in each other, and confidence when they made a decision that they exercised everything that needed to be done to make sure it was a good decision. And so really that those missions that we flew to the Mir and working with the Russians and their control center really gave us a good foundation for moving into the assembly flights and that first flight with the International Space Station. So initially on the shuttle Mir, we had some tensions, but that had been well worked out by the time we were doing this mission, the first mission of the International Space Station.
Hey, Jeanne, I got to jump in on that because early on, the 2 control centers flying the ISS was kind of new for both of them. And for the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks of things, occasionally we would get conflicting marching orders, things that Houston had said, and then the control center in Moscow changed later. And it would go back and forth almost orbit by orbit sometimes. And I got really frustrated one day, and I got on the radio, and both control centers can hear you when you can talk to a ground station, and said, look, we're the International Space Station. You guys have to coordinate, get one plan and give it to us, and that's the one we'll do. We're not doing one plan for Moscow and one plan for Houston. They just needed that little reminder, and I was happy to give it to them. And I got to say, that was my happiest day in space.
So you guys were living together in pretty tight quarters up there. How did you get along? I mean, were there tensions that developed? Were you ever able to have privacy? Was everybody chummy? Who wants to weigh in first?
Station was not big at that time, but I think it was still bigger than shuttle cockpit, and we had enough room to have at least some privacy. But really, we don't need much privacy because we were working together. And I would like to return back maybe to previous question when Shep said that we didn't have normal day because every day was special. And I also remember another interesting thing when we were still on the ground preparing for the flight, and we were shown tools we are going to have on board the station. One of the big tool was, I don't know how it's called in English, but like a big chunk of metal, like you open the door or safe. But Shep was laughing, saying, "Why do we need this big heavy instrument in there?" We said, "Well, Shep, let's take it just in case." And I think maybe not in first, but on the second week when we were installing one of the equipment that's supposed to take like 15 minutes to install. And when we had the training for this installation on the ground, it was very simple. We would just put it in, make several connections, and put 4 bolts to hold this piece of equipment. On the station, maybe station was deformed a little bit from ground position and flight position, but really we need to use all heavy tools to make this piece of equipment fit in a proper place. And it was almost like, I don't know, special adventure. So every day was very adventurous.
Ginger, we talked a little bit about how you felt seeing these guys go off, that you were the mother of the crew. Are you still close with these guys?
Oh, very much so. Every time I'm in town, well, in Russia, I always try to find Yuri and Sergei. I think I saw Yuri a couple of Novembers ago when I was in Star City. And Sergei makes more frequent trips out to the US. So he was able to meet my fiance his last trip. And I'm hoping that they can both make it for the wedding in March if travel allows. And Shep is going to be giving me away. So yes, we still stay in touch. We have formed, I think, what are lifelong friendships. And I'm very thankful to NASA for giving me a job that allowed me not only to support the Expedition 1 crew in their mission, but also to make such great friends.
We're coming down to our last minutes, and I'd like to get from each of you your thoughts on what the big takeaway from your mission was. Shep, why don't we start with you?
I think Space Station, particularly Expedition 1, set the tone for how crews need to operate in space. That we can fly a really big, complex vehicle, lots of international partners, and with the right ground support and training, we can figure out how to make it all work. I think it's the blueprint for larger expeditions and going certainly to the moon and probably beyond that to Mars and elsewhere.
Yuri, big takeaway from the mission?
Я так думаю, что согласен с Шепом, и думаю, что основной целью, в том числе нашей экспедиции, было то, чтобы подготовить к станцию для того, чтобы на нее могли прилететь 2-я, 3-я, 4-я, дальше экспедиции.
Yes, I just will join Shep here and want to add that the main objective for our mission was to prepare the station for the next crew, so for crew number 2, crew number 3, and so forth.
хочу сейчас добавить, вот сейчас на борту станции 63-64 экспедиция, 63-я вот сегодня будет расстыковываться и спускаться сейчас на Землю.
And I just wanted to add that right now on the station, we have already crew number 63. This is mission number 63, and 64 there as well. And 63 is going to land today.
64 missions.
Sergei, your thoughts on reflecting on your mission?
Well, as we said at that time, that goal of our mission was to make station alive, because when we came, most of the system was shut down, some of them was not even installed, and some of them installation and activation of the system was life critical. So if we wouldn't be able to do this on time, we had to stop mission early and return back home. So we, as a crew, we need to be very reliable, and I think our crew was able to do what we were supposed to do. But I think our goal was not only prepare station for future experiments. I think space station program itself is very big and interesting technical experiment. What we did on Expedition 1 was big technical experiment because we were put some things together. We were activating them in unusual situation. As we said, some of the hardware never met each other on the ground, and we had to install it in space for the first time, and not every time it was smooth. So I think it was a very interesting technical and organizational experiment. And the result of this experiment we are using up to now, and as Yuri said, 63 and 60, Expedition 63 and 64 is flying now. So result of our first technical and organizational experiment was successful.
Ginger?
I'd like to build on what Sergei and Yuri said with respect to the marvel of construction that is the International Space Station. I think they were able to set the tone, the Expedition 1 crew and the International Space Station program, that the world should follow. You know, when you look in the news today and you see our countries not getting along or other countries not getting along, and yet when you work on a common goal, even if something as complicated as the International Space Station, we have proven to the world that when you're joined in a common goal, that you can accomplish anything. So I think the ISS should be the model for how the world should be getting along, how the world should be making bigger and better things together.
George Abbey, let me give the last word to you on what this mission accomplished and what it's meant.
Well, I was convinced that before this mission that if we're going to explore space, we need to do that working internationally. That it's much better to work with partners, and I think this first crew proved that. As Sergei was saying, we had components and systems that were built all over the world, and they came together for the first time in space, and this crew was able to deal with them and put them together and make them all work. And that provided a good foundation to build on 20 years that have followed on the space station. And as Ginger said, this is a model, should be a model for what we should do in the future. Because as we look going beyond Earth orbit, going back to the moon and maybe someday to Mars, we ought to be doing it internationally and do it in the same way that we're working together on the International Space Station. It is truly a model for how we can work with other countries, and not only with Russia, but all the partnerships that we form with the International Space Station.
And with that, I want to thank you all for your participation today, and thank you all for your contributions to science and cooperation internationally. And on behalf of NASA and the Space Foundation, thanks to all of you who are watching us today. There will be more ISS 20th anniversary programming on NASA television and also on the Space Foundation's new online digital platform, Space Symposium 365. You can learn more about that by going to www.spacesymposium365.org. I'm Jeanne Meserve. Please, all of you, stay well.